Right, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for another edition of Language Buzz. The idea behind all our recordings and all our interviews is that we are really trying to bring more value to our students. So I'm always on the hunt for people who can really bring something to the table for our students that is going to be just really interesting, that's going to inspire them, loads of tips on learning languages. And that's why today I am welcoming Robert Maisel, who is American from New York, currently in Costa Rica. Is that right?
Actually just got back, but I was in Costa Rica, for quite some time. So
okay, great. So I met Robert about 4 years ago. We got introduced by your auntie, Mindy, who, like me, lives near London. And I was just chatting to her and I was telling her that I was going to New York for work for a few days. And she just went, wait a minute, you have got to meet my nephew, Robert, because he's like you, he loves languages and you'll have lots in common. And she was right. So I remember that we met in New York just for coffee, but then we ended up meeting the next day for breakfast and for brunch, and we just did not stop talking about traveling the world, about foreign languages, about the immense benefits that languages bring you, and all sorts of things. And that's why, and of course, you've got your new book out, which we'll talk about at the end of this interview because it's absolutely wonderful. But that's why I thought, okay, if I'm looking to add value to our VICI students, then Robert definitely should be interviewed. So thank you very much for accepting to be here today. So to me, when I met you, you were extremely inspirational because you're not someone who grew up with foreign languages, who particularly was in a multilingual environment. I know that you have a degree in arts in Spanish, then you had a business master, but I just know that you've visited 50 plus countries. You speak, so I had to write these down, English, Spanish, Portuguese, Japanese, and Mandarin. That is more impressive than impressive. And you are also now a certified cross-cultural trainer. So the reason why I wanted to invite you, Robert, obviously I've got lots of questions for you, but I suppose the first one for me is what gave you this love for languages, and did you feel early on when you started to be interested in foreign languages that you were pretty gifted for them? Or do you think someone can be gifted for languages, or we all have to work very hard at it? But primarily, I really want to know why and how you started this wonderful, foreign language journey of yours.
well, thank you for that excellent introduction and the wonderful question, Natalie. I just found that I was always interested. As I was growing up, I found I was always interested in languages, and because I found it as a gateway to really being able to connect with other people authentically and genuinely. If I could speak their language, I could understand more about them. So that's how travel and language and culture all tied in. I did find that I had a knack for languages, that they did come, and they still do come relatively easily for me. I kind of drew a connection between the arts, like musical instruments, and having an ear for music and for sounds and for languages. I was always interested in music and played instruments growing up too. With that said, I think learning languages is totally possible for everyone. I do think that some folks may have an affinity toward learning languages, so it may be easier for certain people with certain personalities, but I believe that with enough hard work, anybody can learn any language.
Do you know, when you said that, I've just written skills on my notepad. The reason for this is, like you, I believe that anyone can learn a foreign language, and we have proof of that every day. Number one, when we learn our mother tongue, well, for our brain, that is a foreign language. Number two, 60% of the world population is actually bilingual, because an awful lot of people are born with two different languages and two different cultures. So no one questions, here in the UK, for example, we have a wide Polish community. No one questions the children born in the UK of Polish parents who speak Polish at home should be bilingual. So I, like you, I do believe that anyone can be bilingual. However, it's fair to say that we all have different skills. Some people have got a great analytical mind, and for these people, learning grammar or the rules of the language seems to be, fairly easy. Other people have a great ear for the language, like a musical ear, and they seem to have a flair for it. Some people simply have the confidence to learn the language, absolutely. So tell me, did you learn all of them at school, through travel, going to language training? How did you end up learning foreign languages as diverse as Spanish, Portuguese, Japanese, and Mandarin are?
Sure. So it really was a multitude of experiences. I learned my first foreign language, Spanish, through instruction in classes. So I learned it in school. I learned it in middle school. I continued learning in high school, and I went on to actually major in it in university. And then I did a semester abroad in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and I continued using Spanish all around the world with friends and family and people I met. And the subsequent languages, so Portuguese, Japanese, and Mandarin, were learned situationally. So they were learned when I was in the situation. So I went to Brazil many times. I stayed with a friend's family, which became my family. And essentially I had a choice, learn Portuguese with them, or don't communicate, because they don't speak English. But I will say the precursor to that, I was involved in an online language exchange, which was helpful. And that was sort of the precursor to getting down there in Brazil and just interacting. Japanese, I had no formal instruction. I just learned when I got down there and talking to people, having those conversations. As you said, some people have like an analytical mind, and other people have the ear for it. I have the ear for it. I'm not afraid to go out and make mistakes and just learn that way. And Mandarin as well. Mandarin was during my travels. I said to myself, if I'm going to be in a country for more than a month, it is my rule personally that I need to be able to do more than hi and how are you and goodbye.
I was just checking my phone because we had a chat yesterday, and I was talking to you about your journey and the question that I wanted to ask you. And I was thinking of something, and I thought I need to check my phone because I'd written some notes in it. You talk about immersion. We actually have 15 students who learn French with us at the academy in the UK, and they're just back from just a 5-day immersion program in France. Obviously, there was a lot of traveling and walking up the mountains and going into beautiful restaurants. But one of the first questions that I've asked my colleagues who came back from the trip last night was, have they improved? Did they feel that they could use their language skills? Do they feel more confident? Were they really happy and proud to show off their skills when they went to France? I suppose for you, obviously, the immersion factor is immense because you spend an awful lot of time abroad. I'm thinking of a question. What would you say, what kind of skills or confidence did you kind of acquire learning the language traditionally, I want to say, or with a language coach, or structurally? And then what was the difference when you went in the country and you started to learn the language by just being in the environment? What benefits are there to learn in a structured environment and the benefits of going out and being fully immersed in that language?
Sure, that's a great question, Natalie. I think there are right benefits to each as we talk about. So, the benefits to going and learning in a structured environment is, I think you've got your structured time, like your brain can adjust. Like, I know that during this time I'm going to be 100% focused and I'm going to be learning, and you kind of know what you're going to be doing. It also gives you the opportunity to focus on some things that might not come up in conversation per se, like the grammar element, like focusing more on that, vocabulary, repetition, things you're not going to do in a daily conversation. So I think it gives you the opportunity to focus on those elements, which are all very important. And I think that the benefits of learning by immersion are, there's a different sort of element of language learning that takes place by just going out there and speaking to people, because then you get a better understanding of, okay, which word, I've learned all these words and phrases. Now, which are the words and phrases that that folks in this place are actually using and are using frequently? And which expressions are they using, right? And so, and by hearing native speakers speak it to you, like your brain's able to adjust and adapt, and then like learn how to kind of spit it back out in the same way.
That is so now, in terms of, I think we all know the benefits of learning a foreign language in terms of, well, the confidence that you gain doing so. It's always wonderful to acquire, any new skills, but I think a foreign language is something that you can use regularly, if not on a daily basis, because perhaps you don't need it for work or with your immediate family. It's something that you can use when you travel. You can watch movies in a foreign countries, discovering a new culture. So I think everyone's aware of that. In the last 10 years, there has been really thorough research on what learning a foreign language does to your brain, and the fact that it really helps against dementia or stuff like that. I'm very interested to know, for someone like you who's traveled the world, you've worked with big corporates, companies in New York, what, I want to know about the tangible benefits. I think that we have a lot of students at the academy. The academy, we've got very young children because their parents want them to be educated with a foreign language. There's also a lot of teenagers who come to us, but that tends to be because they need help with great grades at school. We also have, obviously, we have people who travel abroad, who have properties abroad, people who retire and want to make learning a language a serious hobby. But interestingly enough, there's a new category of customers at the academy we didn't have, I'd say, about 6-7 years ago. They're very young. They're between 23 and 30. Very young for me, that is. And they come and say, I want to put that on my CV. I think that this may help me if I decide to, change job or push my career further. It's very easy for me to say, learn foreign languages is wonderful and that it's going to give you a lot of opportunities. But I just really want to hear from you, the good and the bad, let's be really honest, about the tangible benefits that you see or have experienced when you can speak foreign languages.
Sure. Yeah, so I'm trying to think about the bad first. I want to start with the bad because I'm having trouble thinking of any bad things. I would say the only, not even bad, but like it could be the case that you learn a language and you don't have as much opportunity to use it in a personal or professional setting as you would like, or the employer doesn't require that you speak the language, or you think you're going to use it more in the job and you don't. But I think let's focus on the good here. There's so many. I'll break this one down, this answer, into personal and professional. So what I've seen is the benefits of learning a new language are immense, because on the personal side, I've been able to meet people all over the world, develop genuine connections, and add to the folks I call my family and my friends, because I've made such strong connections with these folks. I'm still in contact with them in countries, such as Japan, Argentina, Brazil. I've expanded my network immensely in that regard, and then professionally as well, in the amount of people I can communicate with, in the amount of jobs or work that I can do. For example, in two different roles, in the cross-cultural world and in the global mobility world, being able to communicate in other languages, Spanish in particular was a great benefit. In one role, just being able to communicate and establish rapport with colleagues, and in another role, actually organizing cross-cultural trainings, being able to field calls from the person who was going to receive the training in Spanish, talk to them in Spanish, write all the emails in Spanish, understand, was a great benefit, because it allowed that person to really feel comfortable with the whole process.
That's really, really, really quite wonderful. And have you used all your languages, obviously when you've been abroad, but have you had an opportunity, because let's face it, you are American, so you own just like any all the people who have English as a first language, you guys kind of own the international language. So have you found that you had work opportunities to actually use your language skills in the global mobility? Was there a language that was more in demand than others? But a question that really interests me is, have you dealt with countries where they were absolutely fine to just speak English with you, and therefore no one expected them to, they didn't expect anyone else to use their mother tongue. They expected anyone in their country to converse in English to you? Well, their countries was completely the other way around, where they were like, you may have the international language, but you're dealing with us, so please speak our language. Did you have any experience of that kind of attitude, I want to say, towards what language you should communicate in? And is there a language that you've used more within your working environment?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say that, and everyone is going to encounter a different situation based on their work environment. Me personally, I found that Spanish was the most used language, aside from English being the first most popular. So that was particularly helpful, that I had taken the classes and had all the structural background of the language, and then having had that experience abroad and the immersion and all that. In terms of travel, and which countries expected, there were people who couldn't communicate in English easily, or expected, only English or not English. That's a really interesting question too. I'm thinking the first two that come to mind, the first sort of general statement I'll make is, what I've found overall in being in, over 50 countries, is oftentimes in the bigger cities, folks tend to speak more English, as opposed to the rural areas where it might not be so popular. And this could be due to the influx of foreigners, or just people being accustomed to dealing with foreigners, and maybe more of like dealing with the tourist sector. So anytime people are dealing with more tourists, there's a likelihood that they'll speak more English.
Yeah, of course.
I have found that in a lot of Europe, there was, many countries, I found that it was easy to communicate in English, and nobody really expected that you would speak their language. I did find a couple countries. So Japan is actually one of them, and sometimes, I believe the Japanese people overall have a pretty strong command of English, but the culture, they're very shy. So even though they speak well, in my opinion, you may have a hard time finding people to speak English to you, because of the shy element of the culture. So that was one that was a bit challenging. And also, now, only exposure, you're gonna love this, Natalie. Only exposure, and I'm looking to change this summer and fall. I'm looking to do a couple weeks, maybe a month around France.
That's obviously my next question.
was Paris, and my experience there was actually wonderful. I found people to be super helpful and friendly, but I did find that most people I encountered, there was a lot of gesturing going on, and there wasn't a whole lot of English, and I didn't feel that it was you need to learn the language. I felt like it was genuinely just the challenge to communicate in English, and so they wanted to help as best they could.
Yeah. So my next question actually was, are you going to learn more languages, and which one's the next one on your list?
Well, so it's an interesting question. And I think, I had considered Hebrew. I think at some point I would like to learn Hebrew at some point down the line. And as you mentioned, given the proximity of the France trip, actually, I think I'll speak. I'll work on my French, because I think I'm going to have ample opportunities to use it in France and other places. So especially like if I'll be there for more than a month, remember that's my rule. I have to do a little more. Right. I'm going to have to enroll in your academy and start taking classes in French.
Well, I think that's a very good idea. Now tell me, could you tell our listeners what you've done to help you learn the language? Any little tips that you can give them? We all know that, we all learn things differently, in the same way that we said at the start of this interview that we all have different communicative skills, different learning preferences, but there are little tips that may work for everyone, but at least will resonate with some people. So do you have a little list of things that are easy to implement and could really help our learners?
Sure, that's a great question. Based on my experience, I would say learning the language in the way that you learn best is extremely helpful. So if you love to read books, reading in the target language is a great idea. If you love music, listening to music in the target language is a great idea. Or movies, watching movies in that language or using subtitles in that language, or both, fabulous, because you're going to be, and the key here is because you like that, you're interested in that. So when you are interested and engaged, many studies show more learning just takes place and sticks. So that's one main tip, is learn in the best way for you. And another tip that I have is get out there and be confident, and don't worry about making mistakes, because I think one of the biggest things that holds language learners back is kind of fear of making mistakes, or hesitancy in, oh, but what if I say the wrong thing? They're going to laugh at me. Let me tell you something. After being all over the world and screwing up phrases and words in every language you can possibly imagine, we've had some fun times. I've laughed. The times that people have laughed, they have laughed with me, not at me. Nobody is people are not laughing at you. They're here to help you. This world is here to help you learn. And people are on your side.
And of course, I know it's easier said than done, but I often say to people I've worked with that your brain needs to be open to what's happening around you. So if you go to, I've coached people, obviously my language was French, but I was saying to people, you go to France or any French speaking countries, we're in the UK, we're not far from Morocco, it's a popular destination. If you try, your brain will be open to whatever comes back. So you go to the shop and you try, you suddenly hear someone else asking for something. Your brain suddenly connects with that language, and know what it comes out of your mouth is not going to be accurate straight away. May not be accurate for months or years, but actually you suddenly start to create connections with vibrations of that language, which simply do not happen if you stay kind of closed down and you don't try to open yourself up to that language. And I often say to them, look, learning a foreign language is probably the only thing where teachers are really happy when you make mistakes, because no one ever learns a foreign language without making mistakes. Okay, so, you know, I was pretty rubbish at maths at school, actually extremely rubbish at maths at school. And, you know, if a teacher asked me to do some sort of formula, well, the chances are I would need about 10 times before I'd probably still fail. My friend was excellent at it. She would, you know, listen to the teacher, apply it, done. That never happens in the practice of a foreign language. It's simply not possible because there's no mathematical equation behind it. You know, a language is that, and that's what I love about it. You know, it's so rich. There's so much about it. Then you learn intonation, then you learn colloquialism. It's impossible to, you know, to make it an accurate science. And therefore, we want students to try. We want them to make mistakes. And we know that by doing this, they're opening their brain to listening to other people, to have those interaction, those vibration of people around them. And again, I know it's easier said than done, especially when people learn as adults. They have way more inhibition. But to me, it's such a joy when I see people trying, because I know they are progressing, maybe a little baby step, but it's just one after the other, and they are doing a great job. And I've very, very, very often used the example of young children. You know, I said to them, when you see young children, or if you've had children, you saw them trying to speak. You never, you know, told them off for placing the pronoun in the incorrect order. You let them speak, and there was an interaction that was created with them, and then suddenly they started to put the pronoun in the right place in the sentence. So I agree with you. Trying is wonderful. I'll tell you something. When I came to the UK, obviously I spoke English fairly well already, but I used to work in a pub, and I used to do the breakfast service and then the lunch and then the dinner. So I had short breaks in between, and I used to go to this little coffee shop, and I could only afford one coffee, and it was about 20p at the time, and they had lots of newspapers. So I would just sit there and go through about 3 newspapers a day. And originally I thought, well, you know, I want to look a bit cool, and obviously I'm pretty smart, so I'm going to start with the Times. Well, it took me about 2 days to realize that I had to give up for the time being, because I was literally just reading this, not understanding a word. So I tried the tabloids then, because I thought, right, I can probably understand that. Someone one day, years later, said to me, you created a connection with the English language then, because you kept reading, and even when you didn't understand, you kept trying. So I went to the tabloids, then I went back to the Times, then I could understand it a little bit more. That's what I mean by trying, and that's what I mean by a language not being an exact science. But to me, the wonderful part of it is you don't have to get it right. Throughout that journey, you are still learning. I've lived in the UK for 21 years. I'm still learning English, perhaps not every day, but most days. Today,
I totally agree.
you know, today I was on LinkedIn, and I saw someone who put a LinkedIn post, and there was an expression on there. And I thought, I've seen that expression numerous amount of time, and I've heard it. I kind of think I know what it means, but I'm not entirely sure. So I looked it up, and then I went, oh, one more thing that I'm learning today. So it's really about the journey.
It is. And, you know, that story is so interesting, because I do think that our brains, it's a constant sort of autocorrect that's going on. Like all the information our brains are taking in, like over the weeks, months, years of study, the more exposure we have to it, the like your brain just corrects. Like it goes from input, like no understanding, like when I was in Japan, nothing at first, right? And to a point where now you're understanding, now you're able to communicate, right? And the point you made too, that's another great tip I think for both of us to give the listeners, is to just keep going, keep trying, and be a lifelong learner, because there's always more to be learned.
No, absolutely. And I've been, I've started learning English. I was 11. I'm 45, going on 46, and I am still learning English. I am still very happy to learn a new word, a new expression. And actually, something that to me is extremely interesting is that I often share that with my students, is I can be in a conversation as we are right now and say a word that I don't believe I've ever said before. And it just comes out. And I will go, ooh, I've never said that before. That is, to me, and still after all these years of learning a language and being in the UK for 21 years, this is still magical to me.
Yeah, that is.
So let's talk about your book, because that is super, super interesting. So when I met you in New York, you were still working for a very large international corporate company. You were starting to tell me that you were thinking about a change of career. So first of all, tell me what happened. Tell me how you became a certified cross-cultural trainer, and why and how you wrote this great book.
Well, thanks for that. Yeah, so was exploring the corporate world for a while, and then I had a great opportunity in 2019 after my work contract ended, to explore the world. So fortunately, I did a world trip, and then the pandemic happened. It started just 3 months later, and during that time, I thought to myself, okay, I think it's time to rethink things and rework things. So it was that time really that I made the shift into the cross-cultural training and the travel coaching, which is something else I'm doing, and which is in tandem with the book. And I said, I've been so fortunate to have these amazing experiences across the world and have so many wonderful experiences. I want to share that with the world. And I don't know, I think now the world is starting to gain an awareness of this, but I felt like a couple of years prior, the world was really looking at travel like a business or vacation. And I think there's more to travel. There's the whole self-development piece, and learning languages fits right in there, right? Because as you develop your skills, learning languages, you can use that in your travels when you meet people, make connections. And I have a copy of the book, but I don't know if the background is going to allow. It's going to be blurry. Let's see. Whoa, there it is.
Oh yes, yes. We'll leave we'll have the details sent out. Yeah.
Okay.
So who is this book for?
It's really for any and everyone in general. That's a general statement. I think anyone can read it and get value out of it. I will say that seasoned travelers can certainly look through it and will pick up some tips and tricks, and will find the inspiration. And I think that one particular crowd that will gain immense value from this is the folks who have always wanted to travel, or have always wanted to take a big trip by themselves, and have just for whatever reason been nervous, or haven't done it, or have made excuses or put other things first. And I think this could be the catapult that in fact launches people into taking a life-changing trip.
Very interesting. So what's next on your traveling agenda?
Mexico.
Okay. So you've been before?
I have, yeah. And what's interesting is Mexico was spurred by Costa Rica because I spent a month in Costa Rica, talked to a lot of people coming and going from Mexico. And in the US we tend to hear a lot of like negative press about it. And
Yeah.
it's not to say that there are not concerns. I think it's one of the countries where you need to be careful about where you're going and what you're doing, for sure. There are concerns. But I met so many people who were coming and going from Mexico, and they had not experienced safety concerns. They were saying how wonderful it was. And I said, oh goodness, you know what? I should explore this country, because what I know right now of Mexico is only some of the tourist destinations across the border to Tijuana. And I spent a little time years ago in Cancun. But I said, I don't really know the country that well. And this could be a really good opportunity to do that, to get to know the country better. And of course, to work on Spanish and continue practicing Spanish.
Yes. Do you know that's the one thing we have in common? Sadly, not the level of Spanish, but I'm working on it. But Mexico was the trip that was cancelled for me because of COVID. I had booked a road trip there, which I'm very much looking forward to rescheduling at some point. So, Robert, I think that's all. I'm checking my notes. I think that's all for all my questions today. Thank you very much. I am in awe of all the languages that you speak. It's really quite wonderful. All of these languages, Spanish, Portuguese, Japanese, and Mandarin, we actually help students with at the academy. So I know firsthand that it requires work. So it is extremely impressive. Thank you very much for being with us today. And of course, we'll leave the details of your book. I absolutely recommend that people buy a copy. And I suppose that if they have any questions for you, you'll be happy to answer them. Should we just reach out via email?
Yeah, perfect.
Brilliant. Well, Robert, thank you so much. I look forward to welcoming you at the Academy to learn French. There's something we do well at that, and I'll speak to you soon.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
All right.
Bye. Au revoir.
Au revoir.